update for you in the next couple of weeks. And also our Youth Watch members are concerned about freshers' mental health as the unis start returning the next few weeks. So we're going to be doing some work about raising freshers' awareness of the mental health services available to them in Leeds. So that'll be through things like freshers' fairs and social media as well. So we'll update you next time on how that's going. I think that's everything from the children and young people's perspective. Thanks, everyone. And I'll pass to who's next.
I think Daisy's next.
Daisy. Thanks, Emily.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, I work at Fall Forum Central as a member support worker, but I've been helping coordinate this network, setting up these meetings and sending information. So yeah, that's all really from me. Nice to meet those of you that I haven't met before, and yeah, please carry on letting me know if there's anything else we can be doing or different information or what's useful, what isn't. And yeah, can't believe how long we've been doing this now. It's crazy. Anne, do you want to go next?
Hi, I'm Crossland from Young Lives Leeds. As Ali's already sort of referred to, we have quickly pulled together a meeting with providers and some of the community hubs to look at how we can improve and get the stronger message out to the 18 to 30-year-olds. So that meeting will take place on Monday, the 7th of September. Because it's such short notice, we're going to hold a 2-hour window for people to drop in and out so that they can give their views. It's gone out this morning and I've already had some feedback from some organisations, which is really good. And obviously we'll collect all that information with Ali and share with the rest of the group. But if any of you are working with that group, that age group, and if you've got ideas of how we can improve the messaging, please drop either myself or Ali an email. That's me. I've not got everyone on screen, so I don't know who I'm passing to.
No, that's fine. I'll take back over. Thank you, Anne, for that. Welcome, Amber. I can see that you're here. I can't see you, but
I've just turned the background off because I'm sitting behind a window, so it's very, very bright.
That's great, Amber. I don't suppose I could ask you now for a bit of an update from your group, please.
Yes. Nothing much has changed from our perspective. We are still treading very cautiously, meeting young people only face to face when we really need to, and the rest we're doing on the phone or on WhatsApp or online or whatever way we can. And then for the women we work with, again, same procedure. We are looking at whether we can start outreach again soon, but there's no firm date yet. There need to be some updates to the van to make it COVID proof, and or proof is not the right word, safe, I suppose, safer than it is at the moment. And we're also still just doing one-to-ones, ideally socially distanced, treading very carefully. And the office is open for any phone calls or referrals, but not for visits. We're constantly risk assessing. We're a bit worried, obviously, about the news for Leeds for next week, but hopefully we can continue and slowly start having meetings in the office as well. We were down 2 people due to self-isolation and COVID with one of our staff members. So as a small team, that really impacts what we can do. And we just have to be so very careful with how 2 people being having to self-isolate affects the actual service delivery of our work. So potentially we're a bit more cautious than others, but both for the well-being of the women and young people we work with, as well as our capacity to help them. We're just taking it very cautiously.
Thank you, Amber. That's brilliant. Thanks for your update. I suppose technically I'm next under E. So I'm Emily Turner. I work for Women's Lives Leeds, coordinating the movement for Leeds to become the first UK women-friendly city. And so with women, you know, not much of a kind of added update than usual, really. We're working together with quite a lot of different people around the findings from our COVID-19 Women's Survey that we did in June. A lot of the work that we're sort of looking at is stuff around mental health, particularly. No surprises to anybody there. And joining our findings with sort of a piece of work that was done just prior to COVID called the City Listening Project. And the findings that have come from that and from ours are just basically almost exactly the same. So that gives us a big sort of a strength by saying, you know, these were the issues before COVID. This is the, you know, they're exasperated by the pandemic, and looking forward, they need to be addressed. So that's the kind of work that we're doing at the moment. There is a bit of an added concern at the moment about a big surge in people going back to, kids going back to school, nursery, university, a big sort of concern about what that might mean. Does it mean another sort of, you know, step back, another kind of back into lockdown? You know, women are worried about their families being safe and that kind of thing. So that's a key theme right now, I suppose, at the moment. And I'm just going to leave it there. So I will now pass on to Jane, please. Thank you.
Hello, Jane Lee from Home Start. At Home Start, we are opening the office fully next week. We're in 2 teams, 2 bubbles, whatever you want to call it, because our office is big enough for us to be able to do that. We've continued to support people over Zoom. We have done face-to-face visits, social distancing, where need be, if there's been anything where somebody's mental health has deteriorated or there's been any domestic abuse. We've started the peer support groups with the young parent care leavers over Zoom, which are going really, really well. Because of course, because of the isolation and you know, their mental health. The other thing is, I am part of a sort of subgroup of this, and that's a single parents group. We haven't met over the summer. Again, it was about all the issues that other people have just been mentioning, you know, Emily, around you know, mental health. And also the worries of children going back to school. You know, again, with the perinatal, been a lot of worries over, you know, safety going out, and, you know, things sort of returning to normal. But as you say, now, because we've had this spike, people are worried that, you know, what's going to happen next. And that's about it, really. And if I pass on to Jay next, is that okay, Jay?
Jay Anderson, thank you.
Yeah.
Yep. Hi. I'm pretending to be Simon Phillips this morning. Our wondrous co-chair is unavailable to come and talk to you. So I'm Secretary of Leeds Faith Forum. We've got a variety of things going on, mostly meetings on Monday. I don't know why, but so we're redrafting with Leeds City Council the Faith Covenant document. We've got our next executive board meeting where we'll ratify the strategic plan for the next 3 years. And we're looking at other work to do with Black Lives Matters and anti-racism, mental health work, and what we as a city are going to do towards celebrating, commemorating Interfaith Week in November. So we've got a packed agenda coming up, and probably lots of feedback as and when all those things have gone through the various channels that they need to, as such.
Thanks, Jay. And I'm going to move on to the other Jay. Hi, Jay.
Afternoon all. This is my first meeting, so just to introduce myself and who I work for. So my name's Jay Minor. I work for Active Leeds, part of Leeds City Council, and I also manage the Positive Futures programme. Has anyone heard of Active Leeds? Brilliant. Has everyone heard of Positive Futures? So I'll quickly explain Positive Futures there. So Positive Futures is a national funded organisation through the Police and Crime Commissioners. So it's a yearly funded programme aimed to use sport, physical activity, adventurous activities, creative activities to engage young people to reduce crime, antisocial behaviour, to reduce reoffending, and basically to re-engage young people back into society. So it's been a funded programme for the last, I'd say, 12 years in Leeds. So I manage that at the moment. Quick updates from my side in terms of the development team, and then I'll update you in terms of the facility side. So during the COVID pandemic, we've been unable to kind of get out and deliver within communities, within schools. So what we've had to kind of do is adapt what we do. So we've created some resources for young people, children and families to do activities indoors and outdoors. So what I can do is I can send the link to Ali after this so you guys can actually access that. So we've been battling with the COVID health and safety risk assessments. So over the last 12 weeks, we've been doing risk assessments. They've had to go through the process of Silver Command. They've had to go through the unions. So we've gone through quite a long process in terms of getting the risk assessment signed off. We just got them signed off 3 weeks ago, so we were able to deliver some form of social distancing activities for young people as a part of the healthy holiday programs. That was part of the hubs. So we've been doing that over the last couple of weeks. The numbers haven't been great. I'm not quite sure why, whether the parents are scared to kind of let the children out or the information hasn't gone out successfully. That's something that we'll kind of look at and review in the next couple of weeks. Just a quick update just in terms of the facilities. I think there's about 4 facilities that have been reopened across Leeds. They are open and limited service. So the gyms are open, but you've got to book in via the Leeds City Council leisure centres. You're only allowed a maximum of 10 or 12 in, depending on the size of the gym. Some classes are open as well, but once again, depending on the size of the space. I think spinning is available. Some circuit classes available, and they're looking at reopening swimming in the next couple of weeks. So just kind of watch this space. That's just a quick update from myself. Any questions just in terms of that?
Thanks, Jay. We're going to come to you a bit later, I think, aren't we?
Yeah, we are.
A bit more of an in-depth. Yeah, so we'll come back to you in a bit. Thank you for your update. So we'll move on to Kate now, please.
Hi everyone. Yeah, I'm Kate from Street Games. So we're a national sports charity, and our main job really is to help small community organisations make sure that young people and families they work with are trying to be as physically active as possible. So we've been mega busy the last 6 months helping to support amazing community organisations keep physical activity at the forefront. Been working with Francesca on the Healthy Holidays programme, all sorts of activity packs that we've provided, that we've created videos. We've done all sorts. I won't give too much away because we've got a little section later on in this meeting, which I'll tell you a little bit more and how myself, Jay and Yorkshire Sport Foundation can support you guys as well with some opportunities that we've got. So I'll come to those a bit later, but nice to meet you all.
Thank you, Kate. So we'll move on to handily. Is Owen next, which you come next alphabetically, but also named Leeds Autism AIM as well.
I was just speculating earlier how fortunate I've been in my life to be kind of in the middle of the alphabet when preparing for you after talk now, kind of things. Anyway, so yeah, travel's still coming up. There's quite a big issue that obviously kind of like, as always, put a stop in the way of people accessing services and employment and health and all that kind of stuff. Loads of people really nervous to use public transport and have been sticking to small geographical areas, which, you know, restricts their lives massively. So I've been in touch with West Yorkshire Combined Authority and to kind of look at, is there something we can build on when we did some previous travel training pilot work in terms of producing resources or information that might help people return onto public transport, and obviously look at building on what was done with the school, the children returning back to school work. The expected wave of referrals is now definitely happening. We've had like a massive increase in the last 2 weeks of people coming in with what we usually get is fairly complex pictures, but definitely stuff coming in. I mean, this will be no surprise to anyone either, but I was talking to someone from LTHT the other day about kind of hospital admissions around people with learning disabilities and or autism. And there's been a huge delay, like I say, no surprise to anyone, but people are coming in with stuff that could have been treatable, but is no longer treatable and is fatal. So obviously looking at ways that we can kind of put out the message, that health services are open and available, and kind of pointing out what reasonable adjustments people can maybe ask for within those services, doing some work with one of the local care partnerships. There's a bit of a kind of like worry that from quite a few of the organisations that the move now is slowly back to face-to-face, and that there's been a remote offer, and that the remote offer has taken a lot of staff resource, and that the face-to-face stuff takes a lot of staff resource, and whether or not, be able to meet those two demands, and which will suffer, and what the transition's going to be. And also, I think it's been really positive in the lockdown is that we've been able to have more kind of meetings like this and having one-to-one discussions with people. But I'm aware that that's going to suffer slightly going forwards, as we return back to the new normal. So we're just trying to like finalise those plans and get stuff sorted with them. There's kind of an ask of decision makers. So Linda Langstaff from Specialist Autism Services was making the point that sunflower lanyards are available for some people, and I think, tell me if I'm wrong, there's other types of lanyards for people with health conditions that are available, and they've been quite readily available. I think it was in Tesco, and they were quite pushing them and giving them out to people and being really good in that regard, but that could be rolled out in a wider way, and that other community hubs, settings, groups, organisations could be kind of provided with those lanyards, because they do come at a cost, and that would help reassure people a bit in the kind of when they're out in the community, although there's always issues with them that I won't go into. And going back to the travel training, so this is a kind of ask of decision makers that I'll feed back elsewhere, but it might be good to have multiple channels in, is that travel training. So the actual physically going on a bus with somebody and helping them get used to being on the bus or the train was always kind of fairly limited to a small amount of people, and usually people with a learning disability, not autism, and that it'd be really good if more funds were focused on that to kind of get people back out because they've been particularly isolated. That's all from me.
Thanks, Owen. Yeah, really interesting about the lanyard thing. Yeah, definitely. If that could get rolled out, that sounds great. So it would normally be Pip, but Pip's on a phone call, I can see. So we'll move to Sam, if that's all right, Sam. A quick update and introduce yourself. Thank you.
Yeah, hello everyone. Thank you very much for having me here today. I'll go into more detail about who I am and where I'm from in a moment. But yeah, I'm from the Independent Office for Police Conduct. We sort of oversee the police and provide sort of independent accountability and scrutiny. In terms of sort of where we are, recently, obviously COVID hit us like everyone else. We had to go from being an organisation based across the country to a home working organisation basically overnight. In terms of any sort of impact on our services though, it didn't have too much of an impact. So we still provide that accountability function. We're still taking forward our independent investigations, but obviously there are still some issues when it comes to things like face-to-face meetings and being able to access information and evidence. But generally, we're kind of business as usual. I think we're quite lucky in that regard. We are opening up ourselves, and we will be returning to the office eventually, but it's probably going to be a bit of a slow burn on that front. But yeah, that's probably just a very quick update, and obviously I can go into more information about who I am and why I'm here at the next agenda item.
Thanks, Sam. Pip, do you want to just say a quick hello?
Yeah, sorry about that. I do. Yeah, so I'm Pip from Forum Central. So we have a bit of an overarching kind of pulling this work together in partnership with Voluntary Action Leeds and Leeds City Council and other colleagues in terms of the supporting the whole network. And I'll say a little bit more about some resource we've got for that in a minute. But specific areas, so mental health, where we've got loads of issues around, obviously the kind of huge mental health impact of all of this has been massive, and people's fear and concern, and we're seeing a really significant rise in demand on particularly third sector, but also we know statutory mental health services and people presenting with kind of much more complex and things that if they'd been perhaps picked up earlier they wouldn't have got so difficult type issues. So a real kind of concern around mental health and the impact of all of the fear and kind of things that we've talked around before. We also have the PSI network, and there's lots of issues around kind of access and making sure that information is right, so continuing to work to really try and get accessible information out in the right formats. Learning difficulties, yeah, there's huge issues there, and obviously Owen's kind of touched on some really important ones around travel, but also just access. And I think you can go so far with Zoom and online for most people, but there's huge concern about some of the people that just doesn't reach. So trying to think about how we support organisations to kind of meet those needs. I've got some specific feedback around older people as well, from Zoe, who sent apologies. They're particularly, and this is an interesting one, become aware of the particular disadvantage that some older people who don't live on the ground floor are facing. So for example, if you're in a care home or sheltered accommodation and you're on the ground floor, you can have conversations a bit through windows and you've maybe got a bit of easier access for getting in and out. But if you're on a higher floor, or if you're in a sheltered or high-rise accommodation where the community spaces are shut, that is a kind of surfacing issue that there are some concerns around. I think there's also issues around different ages of older people. It's really easy, isn't it, to kind of lump people together, but they've got a really strong sense that there's some of the sort of baby boomer generation who perhaps are a little bit wealthier, as we would expect, are kind of riding some of these longer term lasting impact of the COVID, the whole situation, because they've got a little bit more resource and are more able. Whereas people a bit younger, so people more recently retired, are quite often living much more kind of on the edge of, finances really. So they're really finding some concerns around the financial situation for that younger group and the older group, the kind of older than the baby boomers kind of group really. So some issues around food and food banks and making sure that all of that's kind of working through. And then the other thing that I wanted to link to your point a bit, Owen, just to kind of see if people have got thoughts, is around housing generally. So we'd raised concern around, transport and housing are some of the kind of real pinch points around all of this stuff. And we've got an opportunity to talk to somebody from housing next week. So it would be really good to link with you, Owen, about the conversations that you're having with, you mentioned about the strategic authority around transport, and if we can link that up. And equally, if people have got issues around housing or particular kind of things, because I think one of the values of this group has been that we've been able to kind of pick issues that, have that, it's that intersectional stuff, isn't it, where additional issues for people. Because what it felt like is housing are engaging quite well sometimes in local pockets, but perhaps what they're not capturing is some of our citywide issues and some of these kind of themes that run through different kind of communities of interest or different groups that have got multiple impact of all of this. So I wanted to mention that. Just to mention as well to you that part of our role is to link all of these conversations that we have here into some of the citywide strategic structures, and also West Yorkshire and Harrogate level actually. And health inequalities has been a really big kind of thing on their agenda. Really pleased that some of the health inequalities applications, including some of the work that your groups are doing, has been funded at West Yorkshire and Harrogate level, and we've been pushing to get some additional resources for some of those. So particularly there's one that we've heard this week for refugees and asylum seekers, which is really brilliant to get that funded. And I don't know if we've got any updates from the BME hub actually this week, Anne. But anyway, just not to lose that and make sure that we're getting that. And then the last thing I just wanted to mention was around suicide specifically, and obviously particularly there's often a strong link around men and concern around suicide. And it's Suicide Awareness Week next week, and just reminding everybody, you know, these are difficult things to talk about, but really important that we all kind of connect with those issues and remind people that there is help there and help flag that. So there are some resources that Mindwell have produced, and if anybody's able to kind of help share those and keep talking about those difficult conversations and difficult things, you know, along with, you know, racism and Black Lives Matter, I think part of our job is to talk about those kind of shared inequalities and the challenges that everybody faces. Thank you.
Thanks, Pip. I just wanted, can I just say something really quickly on the back of that, if I don't drop my phone? You were talking about the kind of older people as well. I've heard a lot of stuff recently about older people losing their jobs and being in a really difficult position because they are sort of nearing retirement age, but not quite there yet. And finding, you know, after the furlough schemes all coming down, that there's just lots of job loss. So, you know, that is another thing.
I think, yeah, no, employment is a massive thing, which maybe we should have on the next agenda actually, because yeah, no, absolutely. And I think as furlough, you know, it's reducing anyway, isn't it? But it's really ending in October. And then there's also the new government scheme, the kind of kick start. Yeah, so there's
yeah, employability is huge. I mean, for us, you know, for women, it was the #1 concern that came out of our survey was concerns around employability.
Yeah.
So I know we sort of think a lot about sort of some of our more vulnerable communities, but actually, you know, there's a big impacts on not so vulnerable communities as well, which are really stark. So okay, thank you for that. So we're just going to move on to we're going to have a chat with Sam Cartwright, Stakeholder Engagement Officer for the Independent Office for Police Conduct, IOPC. And we met you a bit earlier, so I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, hello again, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to this meeting. Really looking forward to speaking with you. I think, yeah, the reason I got in touch is because I'm part of quite a new function for the IOPC, which, as Emily said, is the Independent Office for Police Conduct. Basically, the work that we're looking to do locally is about raising understanding, awareness and confidence amongst all communities, but particularly communities of low confidence in the police, so that people understand that they have a right to make a complaint about the police if they're not happy with the service they receive. And to basically explain how that system works. So while doing ours, I'll give a very quick sort of nutshell overview of the work that we do and how the police complaint system works, and then sort of move on to the sort of local engagement work that we're looking to do, and hopefully there'll be opportunities for us to link in. So if you've not heard of the IOPC before, you're definitely not alone. One of the reasons that my team was brought in is that we know that awareness can be quite low. I think, you know, I always say if you go out into the street and ask someone what they think of the IOPC, most people are probably going to say, I've never heard of them, I don't know who they are. And that's pretty, I think that's pretty apparent across the board. The role that we play is that we are an independent body. So even though we have the word police in our title, we're not a part of the police, we're completely separate. And we set the standards for how the police complaint system should work. And we also provide sort of independent oversight and accountability when it comes to incidents where either police standard hasn't met what we would expect, or if there's been a very serious complaint as well, we will investigate. In terms of a police complaint, it's very broad, so anyone can make a complaint. I think in the law, it's defined, you know, very broadly as any expression of dissatisfaction with the service. So if you have had an incident or an experience with the police and you weren't happy with how you were dealt with, or how the police handled the case has had an impact on you, you have every right to make a complaint. And I think, that's something that a lot of people aren't really aware of. We know from our own sort of research and polling that a lot of people don't necessarily know that they have a right to make a complaint about the police. And they don't necessarily have much confidence that anything would be done with that complaint if they did make one. In terms of how you make a complaint, the vast majority of complaints can go directly to your local police force. So if you're working with someone in Leeds who had a bad experience, the first part of call really will be to go to West Yorkshire Police, and you can complain online, in writing, in person, over the phone, whatever sort of format works best for you. Most complaints can be handled locally. So within West Yorkshire Police and within all police forces, they have a body called the Professional Standards Department, and they will decide how to handle your complaint and what should be done with it, and they should treat you with respect and take your complaint seriously and should respond to you promptly. The IOPC, like I say, we set the standards and we set the guidance for how complaints should be handled. So in most cases, if you do have a bad experience and you make a complaint, you probably won't work with the IOPC directly, but we'll be setting all the guidance and the standards for how your complaint should be handled and what should be done with it. And like I say, most complaints are handled locally. You might get an apology or an explanation about why something's happened. The force might explain what changes they're going to make in relation to your complaint. So they might decide, we need to address some policy issues here, or we need to look at learning for the officer or learning for all members of staff. So there's a lot of changes that can come from making a complaint. And there can also be, of course, discipline against someone who you've made a complaint against, if that's found to be required. Where the IOPC comes in is, like I said, most complaints are handled locally, so most complaints will be in West Yorkshire. But for the more serious complaints, that's when the IOPC gets involved from that sort of independent investigation side. So any incident that has involved a death or a serious injury, that automatically comes through to the IOPC, and we would then launch an independent investigation. And you'll notice I'm saying the word independent quite a lot. It's because it's the one thing we really try and stress as much as possible is that when we do anything, it's completely independent of the police. So our investigators, if they're running an independent investigation, they're completely independent of the police. They're not members of a police force, they are IOPC investigators. And their purpose is to find out what has happened, make recommendations on how we can make sure it doesn't happen again, because that's a really big focus for the whole police complaint system. We know from the work that we do with people who make a complaint that most people are motivated by wanting to make sure if something's gone wrong for them, they want to make sure it doesn't happen to someone else. So that's the sort of role that we play. If something serious has happened, like I say, if there's been a death or a serious injury, or if there's a case that's come through that's particularly causing a lot of public concern, then we take on that sort of independent investigation. We also run our investigations on what we call thematic areas. So these are areas where we know there's a lot of public and policing concern. So areas such as domestic abuse, discrimination, or cases that might involve mental health, these sort of issues, I think, as a member of the public, you would kind of expect and hope that there's a body that's overseeing how the police is responding to incidents involving them. We have that sort of oversight as well, and we will call in cases and say, we want to investigate what was done here. And again, a real sort of focus is of the complaint system of the IOPC's work is on what learning can be identified. So that's a real big focus for us, is just trying to figure out, what's gone wrong, how can we make sure that it doesn't happen again. So that's a very brief overview of the sort of main tenets of our work. Like I say, it's providing that sort of independent oversight and accountability. So our investigations, try and figure out what's gone wrong, and make recommendations, including in cases where we think it's appropriate, recommendations that an officer or a member of staff is disciplined, including in some cases, if we find that we believe someone's committed criminal action, then we also refer that to the Crown Prosecution Service. So that's very much a broad overview. We do obviously quite a few different, quite a lot more as well. We work in different areas, but that's sort of our bread and butter, if you like. It's that independent accountability and oversight in order to improve local policing and to improve practice. The reason I'm talking to you today about this and hoping to link in with you is because, as I said at the beginning, we're well aware that most people don't properly understand this system, which is fair enough because it can be quite complex. And in most cases, I think, a lot of people never really know much about it until something's gone wrong. We want to start making a bit of a change to that. Especially, given this summer we've seen the demonstrations. We know from the Black Lives Matter demonstrations that this is really important, and that there are still many areas of policing that aren't up to scratch. And that's why we want people to know that you have the right to make a complaint, and that if you make a complaint, it will be handled appropriately and it will be handled independently. And there is an oversight body, because the main focus of the IOPC has always been on trying to build community confidence in the police. And we think the best way to do that is to demonstrate that there's, I keep saying independent, but to demonstrate that there's an independent body which oversees the police in order to try and build that confidence. And as I said at the beginning, we know from our own research that communities and people who already have low confidence in the police tend to have low confidence in the police complaint system. So, it tends to be young people. So I know quite a lot of the organisations present here today represent and work with young people. And we also know it tends to be members of BME communities as well. So really why I'm here today and why I'd like to work with you is that I would really appreciate the opportunity to link in with all of you or with any partners that you're aware of, just to start raising awareness, to start that conversation with either your own service users or members of staff. Very much, because we know awareness is so low, is just to try and start having this conversation, saying this is your right. It's a legal right. It can't ever be taken away. It's in legislation. You have a right to a certain amount of service in the police. If you're not happy with how you've been dealt with, or if something's had a really negative impact, then you have a right to make a complaint and explain this is how it works, this is what you can expect, and this is how it can help improve local policing, because that's obviously the main focus of what we're trying to do. So yeah, like I say, I probably rambled at you all for 10 minutes, but very much let's focus on, we just want to get out and about in communities and start talking to people and hearing from them as well about their own experiences and what it is that they want from us. And just to start a bit of a back and forth and a bit of a stronger relationship, because I joined the IOPC last year as part of this role, and we're very aware, I think, that most of the time no one really hears about us until something's gone wrong or until there's an investigation in the papers. But we just want to try and start building a bit more of a presence and being able to have a bit of a stronger relationship with communities in Leeds and across West Yorkshire, so that people know their rights fundamentally. So yeah, I'll stop yammering and answer any questions that people may have or any interest.
Thanks, Sam. That's brilliant. And can we get hold of you? Can you share your contact information or?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I'll share a summary of my role and everything, and all the details now. I'll send that around.
That's brilliant. Is there any questions for Sam?
I suppose.
Go on, Pip.
Well, a key thing for me would be to link directly. We've already mentioned Marvina from Black Lives Matters, and there'll be organisations like Catch and loads of, I'm sure you will be, but I think there's something about kind of getting out and about to those direct organisations as well, isn't it? And if you have any particular areas and it helps to have that sort of introduction through us, then obviously we can help with that. But I think the key thing is people hearing that directly, young people hearing that, and it's really important that kind of hear that, but that you can hear directly from them as well, because it isn't people's experience. Let's be honest, you know, people's experience of the police is based on their experience, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think so. As part of my work, say, you know, I'm part of this sort of, my title I really hate is stakeholder engagement officer, but I prefer to tell people that it's community engagement, because that's what I think the role should be. And yeah, any signposting I would be so appreciative of, because I have quite a large region, and so being able to know every single area, yeah, you know, it's impossible. So it's tapping
But we
into what
also
already
don't know what your
existing.
gaps are. So yeah, it's kind of understanding exactly what gaps. So if you've got particular groups that you want to connect with, sometimes that's easier for us than very general things, but obviously we can do both. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna say, like I say, it tends to be, I think, especially for sort of West Yorkshire, definitely young people and sort of BME communities. We know that's where the lowest confidence is. So yeah, that's definitely sort of the areas where we want to start work.
Yeah.
Sam, it'd be good for you to get involved with the youth justice service, the youth services, and also get into schools. I think if you can educate the young people as young as possible, because I think a lot of the young people are influenced by the community they live in, that the parents, the guardians, and they see their bad experiences, and then that's when they have a dislike to the police or people in uniform. So I think we can get into schools, because we run a program in schools called the Inspiration Program, where we do some sports with them, and then we also do some educational programs with them. So we link in with the police. They'll come in and deliver knife crime, one punch, and joint enterprise. So it may be good if you're available, maybe to come down to one session, especially with the high school guys, and just kind of let them know that there is a procedure to complain. I think the more awareness that young people have, I think they have an opportunity to kind of raise them issues. And it'd also be good if you've got any stats or data of the complaints procedure and how many complaints are successful and not successful, just so that you have an understanding of what the procedures are and what is a successful complaint and what's not.
And a range of different kind of ways that those successes are. Success might not be that someone, you know, it could be a range of different things. Can it? So some examples of what success might look like.
Yeah, definitely. And taking that into the schools and informing the young people, maybe whether it's an infographic they can kind of take home and explain to their mums, their parents. I think the more information we can provide these young people with, the better the process will be. Yeah, just in terms of young people, I know that they are a bit sceptical of people in uniform. So whether that's police, social services, the fire, do you know what I mean? So it's not just the police. I think it's just people in uniform. But like I said, the more information you can provide for them, I think the better. And if we can link together, it'll be great.
Thanks, Jay. That's great. And yeah, people in suits as well. Sometimes can be a barrier. Thank you for that. So we're going to move on. I'm also wary.
Two really quick questions, Emily. Sorry.
Yeah.
One was around, is there a time limit in terms of when the complaint can be made? So I think that, we've got quite a lot of people who complain directly to the police, and it's taken, well, it's taken 3 years, but they've got around to it about 5 years later, and then they've been told it's too long ago to do anything about it. Is there a time on that?
There's not a specific time limit, but you're right, the longer, you know, the worse, I guess, the sooner the better. We tend to say, you know, try and get a complaint in within 12 months. It means things can work a lot smoother, you know, within 12 months of the incident. But yeah, you still have every right to make a complaint about a historic incident, you know, and some of our investigations, you know, like I say, I give a very, I know I'm running over, so I won't go too much, but I give a very whistle-stop tour of what it does, but we also do work on, you know, large historic scale investigations. You know, we still have a giant Hillsborough unit, for example. the complaint system does recognise it, but it is harder. You know, people move and records fall apart, and the longer it is harder to sort of have as good accountability as you would want. So we do tend to say, you know, within 12 months is the ideal, is what you would, you know, hopefully. That's not always possible.
Yeah, really quick. Linking into what Jay said about like stats and that kind of thing, I think some people are a bit reluctant to buy into complaints procedures if it's going to take 3 years to get a resolution.
Yeah.
Is that something you can provide to kind of like help people buy into the process? It might be like it's going to take a year, or on average, you know.
Yeah. What I can definitely say off the top of my head, because I know this is correct, and the other information I'll have to dig up. But in terms of our own independent investigations, we have a target of hitting 80% completing within 12 months, and we succeed in that target. I think we're like 81 or 82%. You know, vast majority of cases, investigations, we complete within 12 months.
Thank you. I'm going to be a bit more strict now, because we've got 50 minutes worth of stuff to get through in half an hour. So we've got 10 minutes next, which we want to stick to, if that's okay, to the Return to Physical Activity Sport England, and we've got Jay from Active Leeds, and we've got Kate from Street Games to facilitate a bit of a conversation about concerns around the population's feelings about returning to physical activity. I think I've got that right. So I will hand over to you both. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Emily.
And I'll be strict on the time, so just...
I'm looking at my clock, don't you worry. Yeah, so we'd love to kind of facilitate a conversation, hear from you guys in terms of what you're doing with physical activity, and what your thoughts are moving forward, and how you can use physical activity to really engage young people and families moving forward. But unfortunately, on the 10 minutes, we're going to kind of just do a bit of a whistle-stop tour. First 5 is going to be me giving an overview on what's Leeds looking like, are they getting physically active, what we're doing moving forwards. And then Jay is going to just wrap up as how we at Street Games, Active Leeds, and our colleagues at Yorkshire Sport Foundation have got some support that we can offer to you guys and other third sector organisations to make sure we do keep young people and families active moving forward. Okay, so why do we want to keep people physically active? I think we all think that it can play a huge part in the the COVID response and recovery period. So thinking about the effect of physical activity, getting moving, can have on people's mental health, people's physical health, getting people out of isolation, back connecting. I work a lot with young people, so sorry if I keep referencing young people, but a lot of it applies to older people and families as well. So reducing that isolation and all the benefits that can come with physical activity. So in terms of what's happened over the crazy last 6 months, it's changed a lot, people's physical activity habits. I know you'll probably think of your own physical activity habits, of what it looked like January previously and what it looks like now. We've probably had a lot of dips and troughs along the way. But generally speaking, a lot of people were involved in going to the gym, swimming, clubs, activities, and that's all obviously changed a lot. So we've seen physical activity habits become more about walking, about cycling, about playing in open green space. A lot more families have had to create their own activities for their kids, which has obviously been challenging at times. Good thing though, all the recent findings say that more people than ever are appreciating that physical activity is so important. So that's a big tick, that everyone thinks, yes, we've got to get physically active with the people that we work with. However, this isn't always reflected in the actual physical activity levels. So disadvantaged communities, BME, disability, their physical activity rates are still a lot lower, and have been dramatically impacted by COVID. We work with disadvantaged young people in Leeds, and from all the people that we've been talking to and the surveys that we've done, we know that 2/3 of young people are less physically active than before COVID. And why is that? Some really obvious reasons. About the worry factor is still there about going to community facilities, about engaging in some of these physical activity sessions that are available. Thinking about families having the right equipment to do it as well. Families don't often have that basketball they can take down to the park, or the skipping rope for their kids, and so much fab work has gone in this summer from third sectors all across Leeds, trying to make sure we give families and young people the resources to be active and the ideas to be active as well. Again, a lot of physical activity has moved online, which has been fantastic for some people, and been able to access classes in their own home through different online means. And I'm sure you've all seen Joe Wicks and Mark Wright and all sorts of fab challenges that have gone on, but we know that they're not accessible to all the families that we work with. So thinking moving forward, yes, we think there's a place for online means of physical activity, but how do we make that more accessible, which I'm sure you guys are all working on in terms of digital inclusion as well. And then obviously the financial implications that have hit families. So we know for some of the low-income families that we work with, about £2. Oh, Ali, I'm testing myself now. £2.50. Oh, she's going higher or lower?
Sorry, £2.57.
Thanks, mate. Always rely on you. Okay, £2.57 that some of our low-income families have to spend on active leisure for the whole family in a week. So, you know, when you see some of the community activities at £3 or £4 a session, it's just not achievable. And that's going to be even harder after this period. So thinking how we as support organisations can really help organisations to make it free or as low cost as possible, or helping families to get their kids active at the cheapest possible rates. So community organisations have had a remarkable response to trying to keep young people and families active this summer. So trying to overcome some of the barriers that I've mentioned there. So all the activity packs that have gone out, doorstep sessions, so literally taking physical activity right to some of the estates. I'm sure you guys will have seen Dazzle and Garden Groovers and Barker and all sorts of people taking it right to where young people are and where activity can be done safely. As Jay mentioned, sessions out in the parks, helping parents to think of games and things that they can play with their kids, rather than kind of just been sat on the bench watching their kids play at the park. So our role as 3 support organisations is really to help community organisations get young people and families active again, and how we can support third sector organisations with the financial worries that are definitely there. Quite a bit of funding floating around this summer for activities, but what's that going to look like from September moving forward? And also the winter worries. We've had loads of activity taking place outside safely this summer, but what does that look like when we're trying to kind of move indoors in the winter months with smaller numbers and obviously less capacity to do that? So obviously there's quite a few worries amongst the community at the moment, but Jay's just going to fill you in on kind of what support we can offer to you guys and other partners that you guys are working with as well.
Cheers, Kate, thank you. Yeah, just a quick update just in terms of local funding. You might be aware of these already. So through the community committees team, you've got the wellbeing funding, you've got the small grants and also the large grants. So that's through the local elected members as well. Every year you've got the youth activities funding, and that targets 8 to 17-year-olds. That usually comes out at the beginning of the year, available for statutory organisations, first sectors, charities, anyone really to bid in for activities to deliver over the summer. You've got the HAP funding, which is the Housing Advisory Panel funding, and that's available all year round. So it's just contacting your local housing officer for that information. They'll send you out the documents for that. You've also got some regional funding through the doorstep clubs via the street games, so that's just going through Kate. You've also got the satellite club funding, and that's through Yorkshire Sport Foundation. You can send through some details about that afterwards. Kate, myself and Tahir are also available to support on larger funding pots. So if you identify, or we identify, some larger funding pots, say for instance through Sport England, and you want to apply for it, we can kind of sit down with you, go through the application form, maybe submit an expression of interest. We can go through the local stats, national stats, regional stats to put in your application form. We can supply some training for you guys, whether it's for the young people, older people, anyone, whether it's mental health, first aid training, whether it's activator training through street games. Positive Futures recently got some funding through the European pot of funding for young people to deliver a Kickstart programme, an employment programme for young people that we're hopefully delivering in the next couple of weeks. And I'll just finish it off on potentially as an opportunity for us as a group to kind of share good practice just in terms of physical activity in sports. And also sports sometimes puts people off. So I'm a big believer of play and playfulness. So once again, we can kind of go down the angle of play and playfulness rather than sport or physical activity. And I will stop there. Is that 10 minutes?
That's you spot on there. Spot on. Well done. Big clap for you. Is there any questions? Because we can definitely spend a few minutes if there's questions. Ali.
Can I just add that I think that sport and physical activity isn't on everyone's radar and thoughts all every day. And these guys, I know because I used to work with them only last week. Are brilliant at supporting you to think about, if people are coming to you with ideas of physical activity or you've never done it before and you think you might want to address it with the groups that you work with, like that, if you're not yet at funding and project ideas, just how can you integrate physical activity into the work? Because, it's important anyway, but at the minute, in terms of mental health issues that are coming up, it's so vital. In terms of the effects of obesity on the impact of COVID, as one case, it's huge. So I really think that if we're going to do holistic support, and it's a great engagement tool as well in terms of as people are coming back out and dipping out, to just distract them with some games or play or physical activity, it's a bit of a win-win. And it's something that in terms of intersectionality and intergeneration and older people, younger people, all groups can get in together and do something like that without it being sat around, and it breaks some social barriers as well. So yeah, I just wanted to add and volunteer these guys' time to do that.
That's really good. That's a really good point. I think in terms of mental health, which is an issue that we all go on about all the time, every single time we have one of these meetings, I think, we can sort of think about physical activity being a tool that we can use in our big fight against mental health, especially low-level mental health, people with new mental health issues because of the pandemic, and just keeping people on top of things a little bit. Just a side note as well, I run a menopause meetup with women in Leeds online at the moment, obviously, and one of the key things that they talk about all the time is the amazing effect of physical activity on menopause symptoms. So I'm just thinking in my head now while we're thinking about it, this is kind of, there are all sorts of different groups that perhaps we haven't even considered before that could tap into this kind of stuff. So I might contact you about that. That's any more questions for Kate or Jay? Fab. Okay, so we're going to move on to Anna's going to give us a bit of an update about digital inclusion. Might have to be a quick one, Anna.
No problem. Yeah, I'll keep it as brief as I can, everyone. I know we're running behind schedule. Yeah, just a quick update that you may all have all seen the digital inclusion report that the People's Voices group created in sort of like late June, early July. Next up on the agenda for us is to do our first quarterly report. So we're hoping that'll come out in October. It's obviously incredibly important that we capture the voice of the communities of interest in that report. Probably the three main areas of focus that we'd have as things stand is obviously where people aren't able to access services, particular issues that particular communities face in terms of using telephone or digital appointments, whether that's with health services or other services. What good practice that different communities have come up with as well. All kinds of organisations have been thinking really creatively, and it's so important that we capture that great practice so that others can learn from it. And third, the kind of digital resource that communities might need going forward. It's very clear that this, we're going to be coming in and out of sort of cycles of lockdown of varying degrees for the coming months. So it's going to be an ongoing issue. 100% Digital have done some great work with different organisations and groups, but clearly there's the need for resource is going to continue. So I'll be coming to the communities of interest meetings on a regular basis, and I think we will have digital inclusion as a sort of standing item. But whether, obviously we want to get your feedback in detail because it is going to be complex and it's going to be specific to every community. So another way we were thinking of gathering feedback is just for me to give different people a call and have a one-on-one chat, so that we get that really detailed information. So I think today I just wanted to say, is that a way, in your view, is that a good way forward? Is that a good way for us to collect that information so that it can be included in the report? Is there another way which will be better? And also, if you have any feedback, any observations you'd like to share with me now, bearing in mind we haven't got much time, I know.
Sorry if I missed you saying it. Is there a survey that's going out to people rather than organisations? Or?
I mean, we weren't planning on doing a survey, but if that is a useful way to do it, I'm more than happy to put that together.
Yeah, I mean, we found that's been the better way for our client group to kind of input into stuff. But we can put it on agendas as well in other groups and that kind of thing. But yeah, and we can have a one-to-one chat or whatever about how to get that. Yeah. Great, thanks, Owen. That's really helpful. Yeah.
Anna, is there a deadline for getting this information to you? It's Amber. Sorry, you can't see me.
Well, the report is going to be out in October. I'm very pleased to say that we haven't set a date in October, so I'm hoping it will be closer to the end than the beginning. So I will be sort of devoting a lot of my time to it this month. I would say for initial conversations, I'd be hoping to have them within the next sort of 4 to 6 weeks. But obviously if we go down the survey route, which sounds like a really great idea, we'll set a much clearer deadline for that as well.
Yeah, so it means for some people that might work, but I mean for the digitally excluded, the survey might actually be a real issue. So yeah, it just depends. I think it's a great idea and it definitely will work for some people, but maybe not for all. It's just in terms of planning this time in is always quite hard. There are so many consultations and it's good to know, but yeah, we'll be in touch. Thanks, Anna.
That's great, thanks, Amber. Yeah, it will be absolutely key to have a mix of all kinds of different ways of engaging, for sure. Pip, oh, I can't hear you. Sorry, I think you're on mute, Pip.
Yeah, no, just very briefly, really glad to hear, Anna, that you're kind of keeping going and keeping kind of a new, fresh kind of look at this. I know it's such a brilliant and important piece of work. I know, we always miss little bits out or different communities feel like they're not represented in the way that they would have chosen to be. So it's a really good opportunity, isn't it, for organisations to really kind of make sure that they're contributing to it. I know, Leeds Gate, for example, had really wanted to make sure, because they've done some brilliant stuff, and I think that's further down the road now, so it's a chance to highlight perhaps some of the things as well, perhaps that weren't in the earlier ones. And just this brilliant work. And I think you've done so much to kind of get this on the city's agenda. So for all this, nothing's ever perfect. It's actually, we're in such a different place with the recognition of the importance of this. I think what we do, though, need to do is keep that pressure up. There was an attempt to get a bit more funding for supporting the third sector around some of this, which wasn't successful. I've just recently heard through the Better Care Fund, but let's kind of plug away at other things and think what we do need to do to kind of get it right, because it's how things are going to be. So we need to just work together on it.
Yeah, absolutely agree with all that, Pip. The first report was organised thematically rather than communities, and you're right that a large part of the purpose of it was just to get it on the agenda. For the next one, at Healthwatch, we cover everybody. So we're not experts in communities. I'm not an expert in any particular community, and you guys are the experts. So I'm hugely grateful for all input. That'd be really useful.
Brilliant.
And that's the great thing about the structure of how you do it as well, is it's not just a one-off thing that's finished and ticked off, but it's something that's going to evolve as well. So the opportunity is there. I think, as women were not mentioned too much in it, but we've got a great opportunity to kind of include the things that we found out since that first one. So that's great. I think it's a real positive opportunity. I'm gonna race on now to Pip. She's going to talk a little bit about flu shielding, test and trace, and Leeds City Council free food provision. Thanks, Pip.
Yeah, thank you so much. So just quickly on those things. So just to start with the testing, and so the thing that we all, I think, know is that Leeds is on, this kind of area of more concern, this sort of watch list, because the levels are going up. I think the reason, although levels are going up, I think there's a real recognition of all the brilliant work that different partners and communities have done together, which, hopefully is a bit of a protective factor in helping how Leeds manages with all of that. But it is a bit unknown, isn't it? And I think we absolutely are going to have to continue working together. Everybody will be clocking that kind of higher levels of alert and concern, and the fact that it's kind of moved away from being a few kind of spot areas around the city, which were actually managed quite well, and the interventions that went in, particularly there was loads of stuff with the Bilal Mosque and in Kirkstall and around Fernville Leisure Centre, actually, where there was testing, and that proved to be useful. But I think what is being seen now is a kind of broader spread, and this sense that it's a lot of young people just at a time when there's loads of students coming into the city. So there's huge just awareness of the need to get all of those messages out. So the work that Anne and Ali are kind of taking forward through that meeting on Monday, and that ability to just try and do everything we can to link in. On that note, incidentally, Shaq from the CCG has just, while we've been meeting, sent an email. So I've just put some information up on that. So he's got some information about hand washing, particularly, which he's really keen to get out through communities, so it doesn't come across as a real NHSC message, but it comes across. So there's some information there, and we'll send that out as well. But he just was very interested in people's thoughts on that, and I think particularly he's looking for us to get some of those posters out, and some of them are quite focused. So there's one for kind of young Asian men, for example, and some stuff about kind of distributing that. So as ever, really interested in kind of people's feedback and making sure that we're linking with that. In terms of, so I need to remind myself what I'm meant to be talking about. Flu, I think, is just worth mentioning. Obviously, kind of flu, we've talked about, haven't we, a little bit, kind of when we touched on, things last week. Really, it's a massive issue around trying to get people to get access to immunisation where they can, but it's also a massive, massive challenge. lots of third sector organisations are working with health colleagues. So for example, in Armley, I know they're looking at whether they can do that in one of the leisure centres where there's a much bigger space, because obviously they, you know, the things that would normally happen, like last year where they had this kind of brilliant open event and crammed about 250 people into a tiny little GP's medical centre, you can't do it in that way. So people trying to think differently. So again, people are really interested in how as a sector we can help share some of those messages and potentially perhaps support some of those. So not just making sure that all the people that you work with get information, but also workers and workforce and volunteers. So yeah, again, we'll be kind of sharing information and just to kind of flag that as part of the general kind of health messaging that will help. Shielding still is paused for now and won't be done in the same way. Even if we go back into lockdown, it will be done in a local way now. So there's still these, you know, 45,000 or how many, I could tell you the exact number, but there's, you know, there's people on that that sort of shield potential list, but there's different ways of thinking through the support in terms of connecting people locally. One of the particular things is about that I did want to ask you about is this food offer. So previously Leeds City Council had this whole voucher scheme where the hubs, so there's 27 hubs covering the 33 wards, as we know, and they were able to provide shopping service for people and pay for it and recoup the money broadly back from people. They're planning to phase that out, and generally everybody seems to think that that's right. It was a little bit of a clunky system in Leeds, I think. It doesn't mean that people who need free food can't still get it. So people who can't afford to pay for food will get free food, you know, through the food banks and through some of those different free food offers. But I just said I would check in terms of whether any of you are aware of concerns around that voucher scheme going, and if people have got particular thoughts about that before a final decision was made to step that down. Yeah, Owen, have you got?
I'm just aware that we used to issue food bank vouchers, and that the situation across Leeds might have changed slightly, you know, in terms of food banks and whether or not they're operating in the same way, whether or not they're offering it differently. So it'd be really good to get clarity on that, and then a kind of push to link frontline organisations to those kind of food bank voucher schemes, because there'll definitely be a big concern for some people.
Yeah.
And just to say, I inquired recently for food banks in terms of vouchers. They now work on an e-referral system. I think it's still only the limit for us would really be, it's really only 3 times in 6 months. So it's not, you know, doesn't really replace the current need that many people still do have. So it's there, but it's really a backstop. It doesn't really replace the hubs, I suppose.
So the hubs will continue so I think probably what we need to do is be really clear what information we're circling about what the hubs are doing. The hubs have now had a further extension to the end of December, so they will continue to be providing a service. I think what's happened, so there was a central COVID specific line which has now stopped. So all of the lines are going through to the one number, which is, they divert through automatically, but there's one welfare number for the city around all of this. And actually the numbers so far have been really dropping in terms of that. But obviously at any point, you know, if the lockdown situation changes, we need to be kind of ready for things to be stepped back up. So yeah, I think what we need again is a clear information so that people are really clear what is and isn't available. Because obviously that routes to support for shielding document that came out, have people still got that? We could recirculate that and just check that that's got the right up-to-date information for people. Yeah, I'll make sure that we have that. And then, yeah, I think those are the kind of main things to say about shielding. So testing, just, you know, obviously there's all the stuff in the press, but the really good thing in Leeds is we've now got this additional test centre at the university, which has got really good capacity and is accessible to all sorts of people from communities, not just for students, as well as all of the other, I know Amber Basis and lots of other organisations had had test kits, hadn't they, that they'd been able to access, and there were the various different mobile and test centres. And obviously with the Leeds rate going up, the message is very strongly to encourage people to use that and to do that.
Yeah, we had, and it was just because we knew that some of the people we work with would be unlikely to access the main testing centres, and then we bypass the process and do it very differently, support everybody that needs to be tested.
Yeah,
and it's been very, very helpful.
I think so, and I think public health have, you know, really valued those direct contacts with organisations to be really clear what the needs of the specific groups are. And I think having the test centres enables most people to go by that route, and it allows some focus on kind of different routes for other people. So I think those were the main updates, unless I've missed anything, Daisy. I think, yeah.
I think that's everything.
Those are everything there. And then I just wanted to mention the outbreak plan. So we've just heard that we've definitely secured a significant amount of further funding to build on the kind of third sector outbreak plan work. So that will help support more of the work that you've all been doing and help us make sure that we're building and reaching other gaps and other parts of communities and networks that we haven't yet been able to reach. So we at Forum Central are leading that, but very much in partnership with Healthwatch and Voluntary Action Leeds, and also the Community Foundation, who are really helping around the sort of mechanism. Broadly, we will have routes to get money out directly where we know who the right organisations, and conversations with you really welcome about that. But we will also make sure that we have got an element of a sort of more transparent, traditional way that, you know, people can self-select, because, you know, what we don't want is for it to rely on people being in the know. We need a system that's kind of open and fair and transparent as well. But yeah, elements of building on volunteering, building on this network, and then also, you know, very much building on the work of, you know, the BME hub and working with Black and other people of colour organisations, but really trying to work more proactively and a bit more making sure that we're doing much more to network with that range of groups, which that additional resource will allow. So we're recruiting somebody to help with this work. If anybody knows of anybody, it's a year's contract to kind of really help kind of support and build on the brilliant work that Ali and Carl and all of you together have done, and a really strong kind of endorsement about the value of the work that you've all done, and how the city's really valued that approach and wants more of what you all bring to all of the communication and networking to sort of build that, yeah, just that sort of city response that's around prevention and being proactive and using the right people to link, rather than, you know, a sort of more bureaucratic high level approach to outbreak management. So yeah, kind of well done to everybody for the brilliant work that's enabled that to happen. And Ali's helping to write a bit of a plan on that. So I don't know if you've got anything else to add, Ali.
Yeah, I was just going to add that the plan is loose in that it's a good plan, but the idea is that it comes from the communities, and that you guys and the community organisations say what's needed at the time, and that it'll flow and it'll change throughout the year. Like, I think this week's different to last week, so hopefully it'll be thought out so that resource can get to people and places when it's needed, as well as doing a bigger wider impacts of COVID stuff, so the preventative work as well. So and there's a bit of thought around training and capacity development in terms of what training might be supportive to the organisations, to you guys, to everybody as a whole. So it's just to have those in mind. I suppose that'll be ongoing conversations throughout these meetings and beyond, to make sure that it's right and it's
I think that's a really good point, Ali, about what would help build capacity so that it's not just about kind of the short term, but yeah, it sort of strengthens and grows that sort of third sector contribution to health and well-being being really valued in the city.
Great, we're on our last minute. Just wanted to, Pip, did you want to just have a quick mention about next meeting's agenda and if there's any business?
Food and employability are the two things, but also keeping in touch with the kind of transport and housing conversations. I think those are the areas to pick up. I should just mention as well that we talked about about transport last time, and we were able to get some information about schools transport, which I hope was useful. So just to show that connection, that things that get picked up here, we are able to hopefully get information, and you know, we'll do that with food. I think it's making that real link, that if there's things that are needed that get flagged here, we're really working hard to try and make sure that something very practical and tangible happens as a result of that.
Thanks for having me as chair. Sorry, I was not very good at timekeeping and then got cross and said, come on, hurry up.
You've been really good at timekeeping.
Not sure about that.
You have.
Who wants to chair next time? You've done a brilliant job, Emily. Thank you. And it's really great having different
Not at all a pleasure.
Would anybody like to chair the next one?
It's not that bad.
This really is.
We'll sort it later.
Yeah,
off the spot.
Let us know.
Right, so I think that's it now.
Yeah,
Thank
brilliant.
you.
I'll forward that email, Joy. Thank you, Jess.
All right, bye-bye, everybody.
Have a nice weekend.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Emily.
Everyone, thank you very much for having me.
Thanks
for coming. No, brilliant to have you, Sam. Yeah, keep in
Sorry
touch.
to run over time.
Don't
Nice
worry.
weekend, everyone.
You too.
Cheers. You too.